welcome to Blue Margin's Expert Insights series. This series was developed for private equity partners and mid-market executives who are looking to use data as the short path to value creation. Today, I have the privilege of hosting Brian Potts. He's an operating partner at One Rock Capital. Brian has 25 years of experience building and improving businesses in both large corporate and private equity settings. He has held leadership positions in manufacturing at Cintas and Clarus, in media at the Nielsen Company, consumer products at Blue Triton Brands, and in private equity at GE Capital, Antares Capital, the Riverside Company, and now One Rock. One Rock Capital Partners, founded in 2010, is an operationally focused private equity firm with offices in New York and LA. They have $5.1 billion of cumulative capital commitment and 16 active portfolio companies. Their investment portfolio includes the chemicals and process industries, specialty manufacturing and healthcare products, and food manufacturing and distribution. One Rock's mission is straightforward: to enhance the value of middle market businesses by bringing world-class operational, strategic, and financial resources to their portfolio companies. At One Rock, Brian is responsible for setting and executing the sales and marketing strategy for portfolio companies. So he gets right into the meat of it. During diligence, he assesses the growth potential, and post-acquisition, he develops the strategies for, then helps execute on organic revenue growth. It's great to have you here today, Brian. Thanks for joining.
Well, thanks, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start out with, every PE firm has their own take on what has the greatest impact, what will produce the greatest return on investment. Could be digital transformation, could be other fads, financial engineering, operational excellence, et cetera. What is One Rock's unique approach to value creation, or what makes you guys unique? What differentiates you?
Well, there's a couple things, I think. But primarily, we pull a couple of the levers. So we have a wide breadth of functional operating partners, some that cover your operational areas, some that focus on finance and talent, and then like myself, there's a couple of us that focus on sales and marketing and top-line activities. What we've seen in the market over the last couple of years is, years back, it was really about operational excellence and what you can do to tune a company up. But you can't cost cut your way to prosperity anymore in the market with the multiples everybody has to pay. So it has to be a mix of doing those fundamental pieces to make sure the costs and everything are in order, but to accelerate the top line. At the multiples the markets are seeing these days, if you can't get the growth moving, whether that's through some organic growth or add-ons, or likely the combination of both, you're not going to find your way to an exit that you're as excited about as you could be. And we found that recipe of attacking both sides of the ledger, the top and the bottom line, gives us a real good recipe for success.
So the dynamic that boards and deal teams and operating teams in PE firms experience working with management teams is often, how much do we get into their grill? How much do we get involved? Right. Do we scrutinize and get our hands on it, or is that a bad approach? How do you balance that?
Well, I think it's part of it is we do our diligence and we make no bones about, we're a hands-on shop, right? And we do say that we have some processes and techniques we use to both evaluate and then help bring that value creation that we define with a leadership team. If a leadership team doesn't find that approach exciting, that's not a good fit for us either. We think it's important to set expectations early. And it's also important to make sure that, we bring to bear some expertise. And we often find we hit it off great with management teams early in the presentations. They can see, the what good looks like. We focus on carve-outs. We focus on also some, family-grown business or business that have grown to a certain size. Very often, they haven't seen some practices at the next level, or part of that's going away. And if you do a carve-out and they're wondering, how can you restart that? And I might not know how to do that with the management team that's there. So we can bring some confidence that we have support that can help do that. We also have a vetted set of vendors that we work with that can help accelerate that. So it's not just the operating partner. We give guidance, but we have support and processes that can allow them to move faster and feel more confident that they're not going at it alone or they have to figure it out. If a management team really wants to go that route, we understand, and that's fine. It's normally not the group we're going to want to work with either, because it just doesn't hit our playbook as good as it could.
Yeah. I imagine those entrepreneur owners are a little more, it's more a nuanced and sensitive process to establish a relationship. It's the first time they've thought about going from this lifestyle business to really making it financially supported. Is that particularly challenging?
It depends. I think what we find out a lot of the entrepreneur leaders is they've success wasn't as easy as they thought sometimes, right? They've grown to this size. And now as they scale and they've had people wearing many hats and you can do all this, it becomes cumbersome and unwieldy. And sometimes there's the serial entrepreneur that hasn't wanted to become a big corporation, and yet they've had so much success, they're at that thing that they didn't want to be. Now, they've learned to love it in many cases, but what they're not sure how to do is, how do I go from being that small company that grew to having multiple departments, multiple facilities, multiple offices, and how do I build processes? And a lot of our operating partners, myself and others, have had that big corporate experience, but we've also learned how to install it at a level where you're not adding all the bureaucracy and all the unwieldy size, but you're putting enough structure in to allow them to move and expand at the right level. And I find that when you get into those conversations and you go through enough repetitions with it, that entrepreneur sees, yeah, that's what I'm looking for, and I don't know how to get there. And if we can get into a conversation like that, we'll start to share some methods and techniques we've used to do that. And it often can bring some comfort. Like, that makes sense. And that's where we start that relationship early. So, we'll determine at that point whether that hands-on approach we take works or not.
Yeah. I think it's sort of an adage that entrepreneurs are not necessarily good operators because they're used to casting a wide net and trying to do everything, wearing a lot of hats. Do you find that you're able to help entrepreneurs make that transition? Because there's some deep-seated sort of instinct and survival mechanisms that make it tough. Is that something that you actively work on or run into a lot, or how does that go?
Well, the short answer is yes, we run into it. I think, but to build on that, I'm not. I think we find it works well. You have to work within. Look, I believe in having a very respectful nod to the past. A lot of what they did worked to get them to where they are, and so if you can build off of that, I find that it is. From a change management aspect, where you have to move to something else, you have to highlight what you did to get you here was good. Now let's talk about how we get to the next level. The one thing I find out of most entrepreneurs, they're goal driven. They understand they want to get bigger and better. So if we can sit there and say, let's envision 5 years from now, you're this, what would you do to get there? And you have a philosophical conversation around that. Like, how would you get there? Okay, let me share with you another thought. And if we get into that dialogue, I often find they're so creative, they start to grab onto those concepts and see it. And then we can say, well, that's what's been applied here. And we come back. And I look, pride of authorship doesn't matter either. If they feel like it's an idea they've created, I'm more than happy to say, that's great. Through our conversation, let's go. And we'll figure out how to support you. And you can fill in blanks of, how to run through it. A phrase I often use with entrepreneurs is, hey, look, we've all gotten here by learning by making mistakes. Sometimes I like to learn through other people's mistakes so I don't have to experience them. And that's part of what we can bring to the table is we've seen a lot of those mistakes. We've lived through those mistakes. Let me share some of those with you so you get the knowledge and the wisdom right away of having gone through what good doesn't look like, so we can run down a path that has less bumps on it. And most entrepreneurs, if they've had success and they want to, they're not selling to leave the business, they're selling and they want to keep getting that help. That's the kind of coaching they're looking for. But approach matters. And quite frankly, respect of what they've done matters. And I have seen through my years of bouncing around PE where some people come in and just goes, yeah, you don't know. We know how to do that. And we're going to tell you what to do. And that creates a bad rub, and quite frankly is a recipe for failure. So, it is working through that respectful nod for the past, showing and talking about what good looks like together. And if we can get to a shared vision there, often I find the plans write themselves collaboratively and in a positive way going forward.
Yeah, I love that wisdom because it's not just someone from the outside coming in and applying recency bias and saying you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
The reality is that we made rational decisions all the way. And in fact, the decisions we made got us here. It may not get us to the next step, but to look back and say, because what you're doing now is not a fit for the hyper growth we're after, it was a mistake. I think disrespects that, and it could certainly derail that connection that you need to say, hey, we appreciate your skills and what you've done, and we're ready to build from that.
Well summarized, John. That's exactly it. I mean, if you can't show the respect for what got them there, then you're putting yourself at a constant disadvantage. And quite frankly, you don't want them to leave the room and go, hey, these guys don't know. I mean, and we've seen it in big businesses too, right? They bring in consultants, and consultants have a playbook that they've run all the time. And sometimes they change the titles and the logos on them, and they keep applying it. And it's like, one of the most important tools we have are our ears, right? I can't prescribe a solution until I understand where you are. And when I understand the current state of where you are, having seen enough of these iterations over the years and looking at different things, when you can capture the parts where they go, I mean, we start, like when I dive into an area with a sales diagnostic, we call it. And really what that is a listening tour, gathering the materials they have, the reports they use, listening to the leaders, listening to the CEOs. And then we bring back, hey, here's what I heard. Here's what I think works really well. Here's where you have room for improvement. And here's why I think that. And we sit down and have that conversation. But the one thing I find is if you start with listening, and you capture where they are, you're in such a better place than there's that consultant prescribed model that just says, well, we know this works, so we're going to put this best practice on you. And it's like, well, you didn't take the time to understand where I am, so how do you know that's going to work? And it feels like, when I say it out loud, it feels like, well, that's common sense. Why doesn't everybody just get doing that? But oddly, it's not common practice, right? It's we bring in this method, it works everywhere, so you should do it too. And it's customizing it a little, because very often that's true, the method will work, but they might be 70% down the road on part of it and nowhere on another. So it's about meeting them there and helping them see that. And that's where that's where you work with that entrepreneurial owner. They really appreciate you taking the time and quite frankly, acknowledging what works and where it can be better. And if you start from that point, I find the results you can get go faster, and they're greater than if you don't.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, because thinking about consultants, when they come in with a blank slate and say, hey, we can do whatever you think, we're here to help. And your role is, in a sense, a consultant, even though you've got a vested interest.
Sure.
That blank slate approach is not very confidence instilling. On the other end of the spectrum, when someone says it's the 4 quadrants to success, don't care what you know to date, we're going to apply this, that's not taking advantage of so many insights and specifics to that particular company and lessons learned. So I like that idea of a structure, but it's a structure around investigation and questions.
That's right.
That's an interesting approach. When you're looking at a company, does data actually, I guess their data maturity or their mastery of their numbers, is that a filter for, no, they're running their CRM on an Excel spreadsheet and they've got their shop floor operations on a clipboard, this is a no-go, or is that an opportunity? How do you deal with that?
We see it as an opportunity, right? So there's fundamental processes, work everywhere. When you see it's in Excel, or look, we've seen where they're running their pipeline through Outlook, and it's like, okay, well, interesting, good approach. I guess you're organized to a degree, but we see that as a value creation opportunity, right? So can we help install proven methods and foundational methods where they're not? Businesses scale at different size. Oftentimes you'll find that business that's not too good commercially is outstanding at manufacturing and quality, and they mirror the leadership roles. And so when you jump in and we see that, no, there's some voids here. They're not using data very well. They don't understand how to use a pipeline. They're not coaching their sales reps through the opportunities. It's all about the relationship or things like that. I smile because I know we can help, and I know that there's a way to do that. Now, it's not easy always to get someone from that hard spot to using the tools, but we do find when you start to make it visual, when you start to help, get into using the data and helping them see that using data to make decisions can take emotion out of some things, can make things go faster. It's great. So no, shorter answer, we see it as an opportunity.
I have to ask, you're top of funnel focused. That's the lightning in the bottle. That's the magician who can, for whatever reason, make it work. It's the least enviable job of a consultant to say, we're going to improve your sales, because that one, there's a lot that you don't control. That's the market side and the customer. Mm-hmm. It requires a lot of sort of intuition and native ability or learned ability you're taking on the toughest problem, because if you can solve top line growth, the rest is operations. That can be solved. Do you have a methodology, something that you're sort of comfortable with? That's a consistent groove that we get in that gets them from an Excel-based CRM and unpredictable leads and sales to a strong position where they've really got that under control?
Yeah, we do. And what I would share about it is, we do a couple things. So I think you find that on that top line, first off, we look at the strategies. Where are you trying to grow? Do you have that defined? Do you understand the markets where you can play? Sometimes we see that people are just trying to be everything to everyone anywhere. Sometimes we see they're so narrowly focused, they're missing out on the opportunity. So we'll take a look first at the strategy and where does it apply and where does it fit? And do you have a good pathway and a methodology to achieve those goals? And there's a lot of levers we can pull there, and we don't have the time to run through all of those. But let's just say if you understand where they're looking to go, can you help them provide focused ability to get there? And then that's often where, when you can get to that conversation, you can have a much better conversation on how a pipeline helps with that. And it's about often creating focus into an area, visibility to progress against that focus, and then the tools to coach people to go faster. So I love to get from where are you trying to be? What are you using to get there? And then working on things like sales velocity on getting there faster. And we find that working through that progression is very helpful. And there's a lot of tools and techniques we use to do that. And again, part of that is meeting people where they are. Sometimes they have a clean view on one of them. I've seen great pipelines run, but no focus on a target. And I've seen others where they have a target, but they don't know how to get to it. And so again, it's the right horses for courses as far as what we choose to apply. But that methodology does start with where you fit to win. Do you have your markets defined, and are you organized against attacking them?
This is going to be a biz dev one-on-one question, but I imagine the more common scenario you run into is that companies are broad, especially if you're dealing with entrepreneur owners, because part of being an entrepreneur is being opportunistic and being an optimist and seeing potential everywhere and casting a wide net. Why does a company need to narrow down? If they've got a broad focus, that's more business. Why do they need to take it down and say no to a lot of things?
Yeah. It's not as business 101 as you think. I mean, you would think that, I guess people should just understand how to do that. What I find very often is if you don't have a lot of discipline in your sales process, or you're not using a lot of data, people run into that old I'm a door-to-door salesman technique. I have this solution. Do you have that problem? And I'm just going to knock on every door I can. And eventually someone says yes. So let's go through that. Can you help someone be smarter? Can you create a focused area? Can you get into value-based selling where you're sitting there going, I know there's a group of people here that have these challenges, and I have a solution that can address that challenge. So basically stocking the pond so that if I go fishing in that hole, I can go then have a better chance of pulling something out as opposed to just randomly going anywhere and hoping I find something. I'm sorry to mix some of the analogies in there, but it's that piece that we try to create as we run through these things of that focus. And that focus with some data goes a long way in moving faster.
Yeah. And if you're in a wide ocean, that means there's a lot of other sharks in there, and you're on the race to the bottom in a commoditized space.
Oh, geez, yeah.
As opposed to we own this. We're the experts. We can charge the best, and it's a good fit.
Yeah, I've used the fishing analogy, sadly, too many times. You probably would, but there's a piece of this. If we can help them know what lake to go to and get them a fish finder, you're a lot better fisherman than if you just drop your boat in a random lake and you don't know what's in there. Do you know what bait to use? Do you know where to go? Do you know what to do? And that's where analytics and data can really help. It's like, I've done my research. I understand what's in this lake. I even know where to go look. Let me go drop my reel there. What's my chances of catching something compared to drop your boat in a random lake and you don't know and you just brought what you brought? Well, maybe you catch something, maybe you don't. And so, with a lot of CEOs and other leaders, I've explained it that way and it clicks, right? They sit there and go, yeah, boy, you have a fish finder for sales? Yeah, there's some methods. We can get there. But that's where you start at the top and you work through those pieces, and it sets up the conversation to be really good.
I like that. There's 10 species of fish. You're putting out a chunk of meat on a hook and hoping, as opposed to knowing that they're going after dry flies.
Yeah.
All right. Just thinking about the current situation out there economically, Yesterday, actually today, in the Institute for Supply Management said that factory activity fell for the first time since May 2020. I don't have to probably talk to you about some of the economic volatility and supply chain issues and interest rates, and I don't know, seems to be ongoing looming recession. We'll see. How do you deal with that in your portfolio? Items that are, I guess, out of your control, but that you can design for. What's your approach? And I know that's a very broad, general question. Feel free to take any specific example or avenue there.
Yeah. So look, we've all been facing it lately, right? There's been surprises, there's been challenges. And across our portfolio, we've seen different levels of success in navigating those waters so far and to continue to do so. The common theme of what we try to apply and where we've seen better success is those who've created visibility into their organizations, where you can see volatility of what pricing does to you, cost actually impact, and do you understand the profitability of your customers and rates? So do you get, quickly what's happening and how it's impacting your business? We've seen some businesses where, and we've seen this in businesses we've been looking at too, they're not sure what the results were till the quarter's over and they balance everything up and they're getting ready for a board meeting and they go, we lost share here and we lost price here and our margins compacted. And then there's other groups that are out in front of it going, we see the rise here. We know what that's going to do to us. And you can see in the last year just in what's happened in pricing and things out there where groups that have acted fast to be in front of these, the fuel charges, the other things that have happened with labor, with pallets, with transportation, with all these pieces, groups who reacted fast managed to maintain and do better. But part of why they were able to act fast is they had the right visibility and they had the right tools to not be surprised, and they're on top of it. And
okay.
Then, go ahead.
Sorry. So on that point of visibility and data and so on, I imagine you have some broad stroke, consistent, not formulas, but approaches to helping companies to define and then attach to and then execute the value creation plan. Mm-hmm. I'm curious if being data-driven, feel free to define that as you choose, is a conscious, concrete, this is one of the things we always do, sometimes do, and if so, what form does that take? The reason I ask is that virtually every company on the planet is trying to use their data more. They understand that being in business is about being able to see what's happening and then adjust your priorities and focus in order to be most effective to the highest value activities. In our business, we see very few that really have a mastery of their data. They've got spreadsheets and it feels out of control and they aren't on top of it and it's challenging. Even though they're going after it, and we have theories as to why that is we could talk about, but what's your prioritization on being data-driven and what's your general approach?
Well, there's one quick check up front that we look at. So we have some groups that you run into and they'll tell us we're data-driven. Well, let's align on, do we agree what that looks like? Very often what I find is people say they're data-driven because they have very good reporting and they have a really clean picture of the rearview mirror. I mean, it's great. I can see what's happened behind me and cool. And I can tell you what's happened. So then they'll believe that that's a good, solid use of data. And good reporting is important and it can be used for many things. But when I find companies that have that rearview mirror, but they also have a view out of their windshield, which I like to look at when I drive. I prefer looking out the windshield than the rearview mirror. Yeah. It seems to be safer and easier to drive. That's when I see a group that really understands data because they're grabbing, it might be from a lagging indicator somewhere else, but it's a leading indicator. Something else. And when a group can understand that difference, we see a group that's ready to go. So we try to very often help take those lagging indicators that most companies are pretty good at. I can look at my financials, I can look at my numbers. I've had to report this. I have my, cash statements and all these pieces and other. But now, what are you doing to take that to look forward that allows you to make decisions with data? Which ones are a leading indicator for something else? And so we'll come in and look to find, and it's part of our process is what metrics are you measuring and managing and using it? And we have a set that we will look to use to make sure from a commercial aspect, from, down each department, there's something we're looking at, even, HR and hiring and other pieces, there's metrics you can use that are leading indicators. If you can get to that, and working to coach and make decisions. Now, that's not an easy install all the time. Sometimes the tools aren't there, the pieces aren't there. We haven't collected data that way. Or you'll see these dashboards that look like they're out of a Boeing 747. There's 1,000 gauges and 1,000 lights and things are blinking. And you're like, well, what do you do with that? Well, this is nice to have. I don't know what this button does, but this one's kind of cool. And this is the one I look at every time. It's like, well, can we shrink that down to like a motorcycle dashboard or a car dashboard where there's like 5 gauges I care about and I'm making decisions off of to run the business? And we'll run towards that. And so in some of our businesses, we can be up and running and something we feel good about in 6 months, and that's pretty quick, actually, in the scheme of things for where you find them in the state they're in. And sometimes we're doing IT transformation too, which makes it even tougher. But we'll find our way through the spreadsheets, the data we want, where we want to make the decisions. And sometimes it's longer. Sometimes it's going on throughout the whole hold where we're trying to progress and certain departments will get ahead of others. It doesn't stop us from running that way because, when you can put, if we've been with a company for a few years and they can demonstrate they're using data to make decisions, if they can demonstrate that they have found these leading indicators that allow them to pivot before something hits them, or they can control their destiny a little better because they're looking out the windshield instead of the rear view. We see actually it ends up in turns later, in multiples for us, because I can look at a sim or a book that comes across, and I can tell when a banker has put together all their metrics and stuff versus when a company's using it. And you can see the difference in a business run with data and people making the decisions, and you can hear it in the management team. And those who don't, we know. So we want to get our teams to the point where they do know how to use. We give them the right metrics, and we have to work to get there. It's not an easy journey, but the value it creates later for us is tremendous.
In terms of operational effectiveness, efficiency, margin, and so on, or is it also the story at the exit to potential acquisition partners?
Yes, it's both, right? I mean, we start talking about our exit story the day we acquire, right? And how strong is it? And sometimes, when the data's not all that good, when the things aren't there, it's like, well, we see where the weak spot is. Let's work on that together. And it's an evolution. If you're thinking of the end in mind when you start these things, it gets you to the great spot. Is this story in the right spot? Are we happy with it? Where is it weak? Where is it strong? And we constantly evaluate that. And it helps us reset and adjust and take it. And quite frankly, sometimes we have to give credit for getting to where we've gotten to, because you can forget in the churn and the burn sometimes to celebrate those small successes. And I think it's really important as you get going towards that exit story. But we do ultimately like it to be there, but we have to work those other milestones first.
Just back to the forecasting, the front windshield rather than the rear view. The obvious one is looking at your backlog and then looking at your funnel and looking at your pro forma, and then what's the gap and what do we need to do to fill that gap. That's a nice, because a funnel by nature is forward looking. Then you have what if scenarios around cost of commodities, or can we improve this area and what would that do to impact things. Other areas that you find real advantage in and opportunity to create interesting forecasts that really move the needle?
Ooh, well, very often we're spending our times on the fundamental ones you've just described because they're not as strong as we'd like them to be. I do think we will also try and create competitive views and landscapes where we look to forecast what's happening with competitors if we can see that. Are they accelerating beyond us? Are they doing things? In some industries, it's easier. If you have CPG data or Nielsen data or something like that, you can watch progress. What's really interesting we find is in those B2B scenarios and those service industries and other pieces, can you create the right view to just understand where you stand, and forecasting against, almost a view of share. And do you understand if you're gaining share or not? So we like to look for that when we can. It's a little more complex. But it makes us scratch our head or ask better questions about ourselves. And to me, if you can get the good data makes you ask good questions, but then makes you go find more data. But it's that vicious circle. But the better questions you can ask go there. So one of them is a competitive view.
Yeah. And any leading indicator. How many leads do we have coming in the funnel? What's our current conversion rate? Okay, so based on that today, we expect we're in good shape for the next 90 days. Those kinds of simple forward-looking things.
Yeah, and one of the things we do with some of that forward-looking data and it's even at stages, but very often is we do try to take a look at, this is a bit of forecasting. It might not be exactly what you're asking for, but we look at where we get our wins, right? So a lot of people will look at a pipeline and say, where did losses happen and why did we lose? I find that much less important than saying, where did we win? And if I can take that data and say, why did we win? I'm able to apply that over my other leads and say, where do I see like properties of where I can go win again? Or sometimes I'll learn if I can adjust this through that, a loss could have been a win. But I find the profile of a winner is something that lets you kind of apply that data over your leads. And it's something we love to use to accelerate, because if I can understand where we have the right to win, I go faster. If it's not strong enough, then that forces us to, we're not getting enough. If our batting average is too low, we go ask some different questions. But I find it very often just finding that alone, the pool, or if we stay with the fishing thing, the lake is often big enough to go find many more fish just like it. So how do I do that?
Defining that blue chip, not just leads, but blue chip leads.
That's right.
The right fit leads. I don't run into many operating teams that have a commercial operating partner, really sales, marketing, let's get this going. That's unusual. Is that something that you think is unusual as you look out at the PE landscape, or am I missing that? And why did you guys, it seems obvious, top line's important, but how'd you end up there?
Well, it's less unusual than it was 5 or 6 years ago. And that's when I started doing some of this. What I found was, running across the landscape, these were challenges there wasn't many people focused on solving. I saw so many folks work on the bottom. Look, I'm Six Sigma trained. I'm all those other things. I used to spend a lot of time there too. But I found my way into applying some of those techniques onto the top line stuff, and it works, right? It's similar. It's a change management piece. I think there's more doing it today than there ever have been. I think it's a practice you'll see continuing to grow. Again, I think it goes back to the multiples that people are having to pay, and you just can't do it with cost. You got to grow the business. So with that, One Rock, Tony and Scott, who are our CEOs, they've known that, they see that, they value it, they've embraced it, and they've been very supportive. And I think it's great to go be able to bring those resources to bear, and it's been helpful for us. So I got there really just by I found a niche, and I've worked with a couple other partners, and we've made a pretty strong practice of how to review, how to look, and how to do it systemically. Over the years, I've probably looked at 100 and I can't even count anymore. It's well over 100, maybe close to 200 companies where we've evaluated, assessed, looked at those commercial things across various industries. You will find there's more similarities than differences in commercial processes, and where things fall short are interesting. And they divide slightly by B2B or a CPG, like B2C type thing, but
pretty common.
For the most part, the fundamentals get to be a similar piece. And when we can apply that and have a methodology as we do diligence, and once we jump in to create value, it's a competitive advantage for us, and we really believe in it. And our founders do too.
I do think that most companies view sales and marketing as this mysterious thing that those people do, as opposed to it's actually methodical. It's a science. You can break it down. You can measure it. You can apply the right efforts, and it will produce. I think maybe it feels that way because you don't control what buyers are going to do.
No, you're right. And it is when you see what success looks like, when you see you can think of some of the best salespeople you've run across, or those that, first off, you don't feel like you're being sold to, and that person is often very organized. And that's what they'll be called. They're not process driven when you're in sales. You're organized, but oddly, they have a method. They have a process. They have a way of filtering. They have a way of asking questions. They use their ears. They're analytical. The traits they have, it's funny, in the sales world, is just described different. But if they were an operator, they would be a process-driven engineer. But in sales, for whatever reason, that mystique isn't as good there. So they're this great salesperson that does those things. But when you actually get to work with both sides, you realize that person has some of those same tendencies and traits, that leader that runs out there. And sales leaders, by the way, are very different than really good salespeople, and how they use analytics and what they do. It's a rare breed. It's something we're trying to find more and more of, but it's not easy to find these days, because a truly good sales leader is going to have that nice mix of they understand process and how to work with all the other parts of the business, and how to manage that team that's of that that sales-driven team to go run down that process without feeling like they're running a process, because that word is like a 4-letter word in the sales world.
Yeah, and I think they need a sense for what true sales is, which is pure empathy, putting the client first, really understanding, not having an agenda that you're trying to overlay. But if you can get at the center, how can I help this person, whether it's me or someone else? That's successful sales. And for some reason, there's a stigma around it that is essentially trying to get people to buy stuff they don't want or need. I don't know why anyone would ever want to live that way, but
I don't either.
It's the common scenario. It does speak to the increasing competitive pressure and increasing prices of companies, that you can't just say, look, we're going to do economies of scale through a roll-up, or we're going to get to a better multiple just because of the thresholds of size of company actually boosts that multiple. It needs to be, we're making this a better company, smarter company, healthier culture. And so we're seeing that a lot. I'm curious your thoughts on the outlook and landscape of PE. It's been one of the great runs in business concepts in the last 20 years ever. Are you bullish? Hopefully, since you're in the business.
Yeah, I am. But I think what's important is changing, right? So I think you were alluding to it there, and I'll push on it because I believe One Rock, where I'm at, has a strong belief on this. The quality of what you sell matters at this point. And I think, you can't just cobble pieces together, hope for multiple arbitrage and run, because those doing the evaluations today, sometimes if it's not an integrated business, if they're not really working together, all the work still needs to be done. Just assembling it doesn't mean it works and doesn't mean that the value is all the way there. In the markets, I think the longer this has been around, as people do diligence, they're understanding what the lift is to actually have something that works. 10 years ago, you could stack a few things together and get a great price for it. But now you not only have to put it together, you have to make sure they work. I can't tell you how many businesses we've seen that are incomplete integrations, where the commercial teams are running 3 separate ways still from 3 businesses plugged together. So I think believes in building something we're proud of, that at the end of the day, we've transformed and made this a better business. Ideally, we can make it into a platform for somebody else to continue to add and build on, but that quality piece matters. And just thinking that you can buy it and clean it up, it's not flipping houses. You can't just buy it, put a coat of paint on it, and throw it back out there and make a ton of money. You actually have to get down to the structure, make sure everything works. It's a quality piece, and then you will get your return. And so I believe, as we're building our businesses and we're running through those things and really helping them transform, we're going to put it to market when we feel like this thing is something we're proud of and excited to sell. And in the long run in PE, I think that you're going to see that when people buy, whether it's another PE firm or it's a strategic or someone else, the quality of what they buy matters. And there should become some brands around some shops that are helping build better businesses, because then getting something from a shop like One Rock, you should feel more comfortable in what you're buying than others, that maybe haven't done that same work over time. So I think that's where we're heading more so, because the marketplace is going to demand it at these multiples.
Yeah, this is where I'm an idealist, that I hope it does. I think for PE to continue to thrive, it's going to need to go that way, and can't be this, oh my gosh, we found this arbitrage opportunity. We're mercenaries that are buying and selling businesses and getting rich fast. That I just don't believe that a market sustains that kind of motive, because it's replaced by more sustainable, foundational, robust motives, like it's great to make a business that is healthy and strong and is for real and doesn't create the right optics, but in fact has the right foundation. Yep. And I would think that in terms of attracting the best talent in PE, those are folks that want to have some agency in doing something valuable and good, and aren't just looking for, oh my gosh, we found this way to turn $1 billion into 2 in 4 years. Who cares?
Yep. I had the luck earlier in my career when I was working with GE Capital to work across many PE firms. I had 32 reporting into me that I was helping out. I got to see a bunch. I saw the guys who like to cut them and gut them.
How long ago was that?
About 10 years ago now.
Okay, so a ways back. And what % were cut and gut versus?
Ooh,
true
top of my
operators.
head numbers, probably about 40 to 50% at that time. And
And
then
now, if you had to guess,
I actually think it's less. I think it's probably like 30. It's down because the market, the competition says you can't do it anymore. You can't just be successful doing that. There's more firms than ever. There's more people in the space, and there's less room for that. And quite frankly, people aren't willing to pay as much, I believe, in my opinion. But I think, when I got to see that, I saw there were firms that actually were building that quality, and I've had the privilege to be with a couple of them.
yeah,
And it's hard work, when you're sitting there grinding, and I'm covering a whole bunch of companies at once, and it doesn't stop, and you go. But when you actually see the results, when you feel the impact, when you watch something transform, there's a ton of satisfaction in building, and seeing it putting in something that is a solid foundation, and you're proud of it, and the team feels it too. And quite frankly, that's what keeps me going a lot. Is there's a lot of this out there, but to see these teams that are striving hard, they want to get to the next level, and then you have success with them. It's just, that's what it's about at the end of a deal, when you hit the exit and you look back at what you've done, and there's just a lot of smiles around the room, and everyone goes, man, we really made a difference here. That's to me the part that gets me going. And sadly, exits have been a little slower lately. I'm looking forward to a few more with the market getting better, but those are the things that, if that gets you going, this is the right spot to be.
Well, the beauty of it is that's good business. This is where ideology intersects with pragmatism. You get a reputation as an industry in the market as these guys are mercenaries. So if you're looking to sell your business and make some money, okay, you can go through the gauntlet, but it's going to be unpleasant. That's going to hurt your potential field of acquisitions. People get a bad taste like that. They don't want to play. And PE has a little bit of that whiff on it still. I think less, especially. I think it's self-corrective. These companies are getting more expensive, multiples are higher, and so you've got to be serious about a genuine business value add and not, again, arbitrage or something like that. So I love that those come together nicely.
Yeah, and you're right though. I do believe it's less, but the stigma's still there. There's some marketing that PE needs to do about where we actually do help the businesses grow. And there's some really good stories when you go out and look of taking these small businesses and creating jobs and building thriving businesses. And there's a lot more of them, I actually think, than the negative ones these days. But the early days of PE, and where people were doing that, and there were some bad names given, we still got to fight our way out of that.
That's what I'm finding too. And we started out a little bit in the mercenary space just by chance. And meeting folks like you and others, like, wow, these guys really enjoy developing a connection with these management teams and doing a good thing together. And guess what? It's good business in the end. So that's great. So just to wrap up, it's been super helpful. I've enjoyed the heck out of this conversation. I'd like to say leaders are readers. Any favorite podcasts, books, luminaries for staying at the forefront of PE investing, or maybe more specifically in your playground of it?
Boy, sadly, I'm going to be that boring guy that tells you I don't have a specific, but I do take in a lot, right? So I'm trying to look at different topics of the day, different things. I am a big reader of the news to stay out in front, and I listen to many podcasts. And actually, I'm the guy that asks for recommendations as well, and I just glom onto them. I don't have a set favorite. There's not one I can't wait for the next episode. I do a lot of searching of topics. So sorry, I don't have a really good specific answer for you, but I do think it's important to always be absorbing and staying on what's happening. There's a lot to learn. If we feel like we stopped learning, then we can't help others. I mean, so even the chance to participate in this, I get excited because I've learned from you, John, listening, and then, quite frankly, all the businesses we get to help. And when you get to listen, there's a lot to learn out there. So don't have a specific, but I think
I agree with that. It's a lesson I keep learning in business. If you're in a bubble and advising yourself, your entire world of knowledge is right there. You can't see a world outside of that until you open a door and bring someone else in.
Amen.
And oh my gosh, something you didn't know could exist does, and it changes your thinking so often. A good book, a good podcast. What's next on the horizon for you, and how can people get in touch with you if they want to talk further?
Yeah, what's next for me is, well, I have a full slate with One Rock, and we're just we have a lot of stuff going on, and I am going to keep plugging away to help our portfolio grow. We've got some acquisitions we're excited about. We're expanding into another continent. And I look forward to getting back over to Europe, where I've done some stuff before in other places. So to me, that's what's coming up next. And quite frankly, I think the easiest way to reach out, if someone wants to get in touch with me, and I'm always happy to have a great conversation or dive into talk philosophies, hit me on LinkedIn. Brian Potts, you'll find me there. I do check my messages, and I would be more than happy to engage a conversation that way and dive in. And John, I really appreciate the opportunity today. I've enjoyed it and appreciate what you're doing just to help us get a voice out there.
Thank you, Brian. And if you have a companion ticket for those trips to Europe, just keep me in mind.
Yeah, sure thing.
Check my schedule. All right. Thanks, Brian. We'll talk soon.
Have a good one.
Bye.